The phrase touch grass is one that's commonly used referred to gamers who they feel do not get enough fresh air. However, as a Pokemon player, it's a great time to touch grass. And no, I'm not just talking about the summer weather. Here is some grass types that you should be using in Paldea decks. Before I begin on this, yes, it's literally a PowerPoint presentation, I just wanted to address a few things about the last video. First of all, I wanted to say thank you very much for the support in the video that is about Hacker. I'm honestly incredibly surprised of how well it did, and thank you all for, feedback and things like that. The main thing that came up, though, was in regards to the mic. And I'm going to be dead honest here, I don't have one. It is a work in progress, so bear with me for the time being. Anyways, let's start talking about touching grass, shall we? I am going to go over these four in some detail. I think if anyone is playing the format, you should not be surprised about these four being here. And I have a couple low tier honorable mentions, which I'll probably get cracking with first. Without further ado, let's get into it. So in terms of said low tier honorable mentions, we have Abomasnow, a mon that has seriously risen up in popularity, both in this gen and in old gens recently. This gen, it's no surprise due to the change in the buff of Snow, giving it greater defense, which helps it versus some of the physical water types that can be seen in the tier, such as Palafin and Ogerpon Wellspring. It's also a really good Veil setter, has some really nice coverage both on the physical and special side, and is very good at freezing things, as we found out through DCL, where it was top 5 in the kill leaders, which is pretty impressive given it's a 6-point mon. The other mon is here because Abomasnow looked weird in this slide by itself. Meganium's alright though. It does similar things to what I said about Abomasnow in terms of checking those high tier water types. Greninja is another one that also comes to mind. Meganium does that slightly better than Abomasnow due to the lack of weakness. And it also has a super weird option in this gen. It does have slow encore, which is nice. It does get access to knockoff. But stuff like Curse is kind of underrated and can really flip a matchup on its head if it's unexpected. I almost put Arboliva here, but I don't think anyone actually think that's a good mon aside from German. Sorry. I have the Ogerpons. And the reason I have the Ogerpons separate is because you kind of don't use them as grass types. Or at least, most of them. Obviously, Ogerpon Tiamat had its time where it was a popular Terra Captain choice, due to the additional speed that was seen as so critical. But with how many amazing grass resist drafts happen naturally, because they feel like they need a ground immunity, it makes it really hard for Ogerpon to do anything. Yes, you can see it still drafted because of the decent speed tier and its good utility, but Ogerpon Teal is way inferior to the other three. Ogerpon Wellspring we know is the best one, and that is solely because of the water typing. It's better with Terra, and it's just the best one, even on the base one. But the other two are the two that I want to focus on, being Cornerstone and Heartflame. Both of these have been quietly gaining popularity. Ogerpon Cornerstone is great. Having a reliable rock stab that's strong is what I unheard of. Ivy Cudgel is a really good click for it. 30 makes it a really nice lead, and has the same utility. And that's why the Ogerpons are popular, is because it has really good utility in combination with its offensive prowess. Heartflame has also been going up in popularity, and that's even more recent than Cornerstone. And that is solely because of the realization that teams do not have good fire resistance in Magma. And that is why we've seen stuff like L5 do well with the Scoville, for example. On Heartflame is just more consistent Scoville that doesn't have access to Terra. Do not give this thing access to Terra. It is an absolute nightmare. I thought it was okay, but it's not. And I was wrong. Before I begin on this, getting into some of the main topics of the video here, let's begin with Sinistcha. And the reason we're going to start with this one is it's probably the least relevant of the four that I want to talk about. However, it's still a major metagame staple, ever since its induction. And that is solely because people realize very quickly that it's a phenomenal Terror Captain, due to its many different sets that are capable of just winning an endgame by itself, or breaking through so much progress that it's impossible to come back from. It is a very popular pairing to have with Iron Moth. That is something that has stayed consistent throughout. You see the odd one with like Salamence, but it is predominantly Iron Moth. And there's no particular reason as to why that's the case. Like, they just kind of complement each other well. But that's just how it's been. It's been allowable under every pricing. And that's the same now, even with the 27 to 28. It also gives you a couple extra points for a third Terra Captain if you want. However, this mon isn't 100% reliant on Terra. It is a decent natural typing for the metagame that is currently developed, with access to Heatproof, which does help a lot, particularly with what I said earlier about lack of fire resists. Having this thing not completely get shredded by them does help. It acts as a really reliable spin blocker in quite a few matchups. It beats the main three. Beats might be a bit too far. It forces very particular sets on the big three rapid spinners. Tusken Treads have to run really offensive to get through it, and even then it doesn't fully break through Culprit sets that are like max Fizz Def. And Terapagos, it can't really get through, and it's kind of forced to just toxic and whittle it down. Finisher also has really good utility options in the form of Stun Spore and Strength Sap. They are the big two in my opinion. Stun Spore is very nice because paralysis is great at all times, especially in a metagame where speed is so important. And Strength Sap is just a really nice recovery option and forces really particular pivoting around it, which sometimes you can also benefit from through Pain Split. This which is something that I don't think I've ever seen in the game, but it's probably good in certain situations, especially with the aforementioned Moth. And I'm just going to end this by saying that we got this is move. Why do we need Giga Drain plus Scald amalgamated into one move? Scald is good enough. It does not need an added bonus. Also, on Sinister, it's the only one that I couldn't get a 3D sprite for. Low-key annoying. Now let's move on to Hydrapple here, folks. Hydrapple has become the new phenomenon that is constantly rising to the tier lists, going up approximately 5 points in value to Terra Captain since the start of this year. Hydrapple is effectively a mini-taunt team, but it does have reliable recovery in the form of Recover, and does not have the same speed or pivoting options, although people do get around that through using the Jackpack. Usually. There's a variety of pair types this mon can use in a defensive capacity, particularly in regards to its assault vest sets, as well as just setup sets or pivot sets. You sometimes also see it use it offensively, and I have an example of that I'm going to show you later. It's naturally one of the best mons in the tier at dealing with Ogerpon Wellspring and Palafin, as previously mentioned, as well as Great Tusk. Although Great Tusk, you do kind of need a Yachi Berry, but a lot of the time Terra is a good enough bluff to the point where they're not going to stay. Pokemon's move pool is ridiculous in terms of options. A lot of the time you do see the same sets, whether that be, the Assault Vest sets will have Dragon Tail on it usually, or the plot sets will be all the same. It's really nice coverage though. Why this mon gets Hydro Pump, I do not know. Or Sucker Punch, to be honest. This mon doesn't have arms. But the move pool is super underrated. It even has access to Curse, and Curse sets are cool. It's really difficult to prep for because you don't quite know what to expect. Although it has kind of gone into a bit of a pattern with the way that you're not going to who have been using it and the kind of structure that's been on. And we will get into that in later videos where I want to talk about how the metagame has shifted in a very particular way recently. I'm going to end on the point of Pickle being stupid. And the reason for it is, why does it have a 30% chance of a drawback? Like anyone that was around long enough to back in Orange when Scald was stupid. Well, Scald is still kind of dumb now. 30% felt like 100% all the time in Orange back in the day. So having that being your drawback from an 160 base power move, it's just not fun. This mon doesn't Pickle Beam on most sets. You do see the odd Draco if you need the consistency, but never run Dragon Pulse on Hydrapple, folks. It's not needed. Also, I love how goofy this thing's spread. It's absolutely amazing. I think I've mentioned Yerdunk enough times in this channel now to include one of his games, and this is probably the most vague example of Hydrapple that I will use in terms of its offensive capacity in comparison to what it does. mostly because I want to bring that up later in other videos. This game, Yurdunk is playing Addison as part of the LWC Finals, where Canada is taking on Team UK. And as you can see, it looks like a fairly alright Hydrapple matchup. There's not a lot of things that naturally deal with it. And Yurdunk decided to go with Terra Dragon here, probably with the idea of Nasty Plot Fickle Beam just being really difficult to stop. I don't honestly remember the drafts because I didn't pay attention to DLWC that heavy, and I don't know was their Dragon Resist benched, for example, but I kind of highly doubt it. So let's hop into the game and see what happens. You'll see pretty early what I mean by Hydrapple, so that's good. We see the Hydrapple lead into Yuxi, the Terror immediately, as Addison makes the play to trick a Sticky Barb. Taking the Fickle Beam doing 38, Yuxi gets it rocks, and Fickle Beam being dumb means that Yuxi dies turn 2, only for the sake of 25% that can be regenerated off. Light Screen goes up as Leech Storm does 58. The Yurdunk has made so much forward progress. The Gliscor come in on the Reflect to get the Toxic Orb off, fair enough. The Tentacruel comes in hard on the Fling of Toxic Orb, really nice prediction there on Addison's end. Feraligatr comes in, probably has Psychic Fangs with how quickly he wants to come in, but Addison decides to Toxic instead of risking her Greninja, which is really enough. Psychic Fangs goes off different screens. Sandy Shocks comes back in and takes a flip turn, living on 1%, and Greninja comes in looking to threaten for a Battle Bond boost. Gathering Fire comes in, reveals to be deaf as hell. That's not 5. Overquote comes out on the Gathering Fire, which reveals to have the clear on it, as it happens with Morning Sun. Tiny Shocks comes in to be sacked off as Spike goes up, meaning it's not quite a sack, but it gives it one last opportunity to click the screen. Greninja comes in this time to prevent the Psychic Fangs. Pulse is clicked, doing 46, and getting Dragon killed out in the process. Tiny Shocks then does the Spikes, with Feraligatr just about hanging off from poison. Hawlucha comes in, terrestrializes, and clicks sub to avoid the Dragon Tail, meaning that Addison's in a really nice spot as Feraligatr has poison. Hydrapple, our main protagonist, comes back in here, as Sky Type misses, showing that Hydrapple has plot armor. Fickle Beam breaks the sub. Sub gets clicked as Addison's trying to rack up the Sticky Barb. Fickle Beam gets clicked again. Another sub, another Fickle Beam, still doesn't double since it killed the Yuxi, but that's okay. As Overcloak comes in this time, expecting to take the Acrobatics, which it does, and reveal the Rocky Helmet. Really nicely pivoted on Yurdunk's end. Acrobatics means the Hawlucha dies to recoil, as Overcloak gets up the famous second layer spikes that nobody cares about. Third Pulse is clicked, and Yurdunk allows the Battle Bond to get activated because he has access to the crap. Very obviously. Oops. Third Pulse is clicked. Hopefully it doesn't flinches for Yurdunk's sake. Crit, though, does 50 as Darkthorn picks off the Greninja. And this is where the really factor fire comes back into play. And firepower only does 40%. Another Dragon Dance from Addie, because she knows that her power is not going to kill when fighting. And here comes a bit of a Morning Sun Belfast, as Yurdunk does not have Toxic on his drop base, which is kind of unfortunate. More Morning Suns, more Earth Powers, we didn't see his Death Drop, no Death Drop. Morning Sun again, another Earth Power, yeah, really riveting gameplay here, guys. Another Morning Sun, another Earth Power. No, but my luck would be the same. I wouldn't have gotten a drop by now. Eventually, since I still dropped the Heat Crash, Gliscor comes in. However, it is out of range of +2 Heat Crash as High Horsepower does not kill. We see another Morning Sun trying to stay out of Water Shuriken range, but High Horsepower is doing too much damage. And this is a problem for Addison. She just admits defeat, decides to kill off the Gliscor. Greninja comes in, Water Shuriken comes off, takes it off, and the Tentacruel is back in at 26%. Isn't going to win the game at this point, and Addison gets the time to forfeit. It was a really nice game from Yurdunk, but a lot of it came from that early game pressure from Hydrapple. Being able to kill Yuxi for the cost of only taking 25% off being up, as well as getting that massive hit off from the finish. Had him in a really good position. And he killed the power of the Yes, it did have plot armor here missing with the sound effect being dodged, and that could well have won Addis in the game, but it's kind of hard to know. I don't know spreads, so I haven't asked time. I don't know off my head, but let's just continue with the game. Ellie, on Masquerada. Masquerada is an interesting one because this mon has slowly but surely risen to probably top two mons in the form. And that is because it has access to everything it could possibly need in this metagame. It was pretty decent in its inception, but it was the access to triple action in the DLC that really rose it up, allowing it to deal with stuff like that. Its coverage is phenomenal, especially in conjunction with the skill stamina. Pretty. It's pretty underrated. You can use that in bad matchups. Like, if you don't think it's a matchup where yes, around to be clicking buttons, just get up spikes with it. Or trick a scarf. Yeah, trick a crippling item on it, something. I've seen some copycats with this mod. It just has everything it could want. Speed tier is perfect for this metagame. That 1 point faster than Greninja actually makes a massive difference. While it's being naturally override Valiant. Although, we are Valiant after this typically. Booster speed? It came up recently about why is the speed tier considered perfect with Masquerada compared to a model like Weavile, which is typically hated in the FE metagame. I think it's solely because of the stuff that I mentioned earlier in regards to its utility. It does have that slightly bad power too. It's fairly comparable with Weavile, but when you add everything else, Masquerada. There has been discussions of should you take this mon before Valiant. I personally disagree, but I do think it's easier to draft around. Flower Trick is also dumb, being able to crit guaranteed, especially in a metagame where you see so much more screens, and quite a bit of higher defense body press stuff. Works quite nicely. Because I think this thing is a really big topic conversation that I'm going to come back to a couple of times. I think Terra is a brilliant. And this is the best Terra captain in the game when it comes to winning a game on its own. It needs minimal positioning sometimes and really good set optimization to the point where there's nothing your opponent can do. It just wins. It can be tailored to beat almost everything in the game as long as you're willing to put in that effort in EV spread design. And I have an example of that to show and was kind of the main focus to me of why I feel the way that I feel about it. Its variety of setup options are crazy. The access to bulk up fat sets while also needing to be able to deal with the SD Trailblaze sets means that you need to tailor in multiple mons to beat Zarude on your build. And that is so restricting in a metagame that is as volatile. Its utility is even amazing. You see it running taunt so often, Encore is a tool you have to respect every time. And at the end of the day, it has access to two healing moves that you have to approach in two completely different ways. Jungle healing is extremely unique and beneficial this generation due to the lack of access to moves like Heal, Down, and Refresh. It means that it can act as a status absorber, and you can't just beat it by toxic most of the time. Synthesis is great too, and in recording certain matchups depending on the calcs. But a lot of the time you do see people leaning towards jungle healing, or sets that incorporate Drain Punch, because it's so much easier. Especially if you are able to run Terrify. As I kind of alluded to, this is the game that really made me change my mind on Terra Zarude and made me have the feeling that you can enter this one to do absolutely everything. It obviously had results before this, but this was the main game for me that I was like, ooh, this is the problem. So this game is in the semi-finals of Draft Champions League last year, where Sage, playing for Infernal Armory, is taking on Lucas, representing Trick of Eye, a team that I was on last year. This was a matchup that we did not like whatsoever. However, Lucas was doing fairly okay in testing, and we had a build that we were happy with. And this was a draft that he'd been piloting really well throughout the season. But Raging Bolt just racking the skills like you wouldn't believe. However, this is a team that had been doing phenomenal, with Sage predominantly in the piloting. So it was a fairly high-stakes matchup. Zarude had obviously been doing really well in DCL. It was the kill leader by quite a distance already coming into this. And it wasn't even drafted in every single draft initially. It was just showing that much, but this was kind of the cherry on top, in my opinion. If there's any others Root games, feel free to link them down in the comments if you feel that there's better examples for this. I'd love to hear people's opinions. Anyways, let's hop right into the game. We see Lucas lead with Raging Bolt, as we see the Cinderace lead, with Booster Energy getting activated. And the Terra Dragon turn 1 from Lucas. Dragon Pulse to 66% to Cinderace, which gets Super Flying off. Also revealed to be Citrus, which was an interesting attack. Dragon Pulse on a crit does half to the Mango. Crocodile comes in on the Mango. Check. Well, I said dedicated check and took 76. So the Root comes in on the front. We come down the Lola. As the Root tears into a fighting type and knocks out down the Boots, taking a flip card in the process. Sneasler comes in, looking to do some harm. The leftovers is removed as well, which the Root's just one of those monsters that can actually rule leftovers these days. Gargoyle is revealed after it comes in to take close combat. This was completely a surprise, and we're very much behind the 8 ball here. Earthquake does 50% to the Lapras before Crocodile is picked off with an Ice Shard, but this Lapras is the problem. Ice Shard does 20, playing around, and Thunderbolt leads to the Conberry, and then proceeds to play around Thunderpop. The god that she is, and Dragon Dances. Alomola is about to take an Ice Shard to the Sprite Map. Nobody. And here's an Earthquake, as a Wish gets thrown up in the air. Tropicos comes in, knowing that the Terra Shell is completely safe at this point, as Sage goes for another Dragon Dance, as she should. Waterfall procs the Terra Shell, only doing 21, and Flipers, meaning this thing is to take even more damage. It's pretty impressive. The Lapras dies to start on. But here comes the Zuru. Alamola comes in on the Drain Punch. As mentioned earlier, Terrifying Drain Punch is really nice, especially when there is an Alamola. Swords Dances on the flip turn, and here comes the Tinkaton. I pause it here. I'm going to pause it, is you'd think in this situation, like, I might not like this, but hard to know. Tinkaton isn't exactly the strongest thing, especially when it can't rely on Tinkaton Hammer to get the job done. But, yeah, let's show this sequence here. Drain Punch is 51, getting it back to full, pops a balloon, and Thunderwave goes off. Play Rough is 36. That's insane. Stage Cook's Jungle Healing is basically back to full, and the game's over. Immediately. Drain Punch picks up Tinkaton. Alamola comes in, cannot withstand the pressure. Another SD comes off. Last Chance Icy Wind for Raging Bolt for Revenge is the only way you can see it back in this game. Another SD on the Healing Wish into said Raging Bolt. Dragon Pulse crit does 63. As Drain Punch gets 80. That's normal. Gets it pretty much back full. Brick Meteor does not quite get the job done. Drain Punch picks it off. But all that leaves is a very weakened Terrapagos. And while the Root might go down here, to a Terra Starstorm, I don't know if that's wrong. That's really flat. Careful thing just comes in. And it was a pretty high profile win. It was the turning point in the series that led to Armory getting the 1-up on us. Unfair to buy. I'll probably be neutral with things, I swear. But it was the Root that turned the tide of this game. Because it is incredibly unpredictable in regards to what Terra can expect. That is the difficult part of it. That's why you're seeing the rise of faster monsters with Terra Stellar, because it is a catch-all. So I expect to see more Terra Stellar Keldeo. We've seen Terra Stellar Tornadus be used in PPL at points in the season. And you'll keep thinking. There are Terra Stellar captains that can deal with those fatter sets. You might see the other Scarf ones deal with the Trailblazer ones as well. I don't know. Yeah, overall, this thing's an absolute demon, and I'm sure this isn't the last time. Yeah. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my mini ramble. And I'm going to keep a good generation for now. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next one. But in life. Peace.